Hi, welcome to Group 9 presentation. In this presentation, we will introduce and discuss finding and information about our assessed community, Queen Anne. So our assessed location is Queen Anne, and Queen Anne is a large neighborhood in central Seattle. Queen Anne is divided into two prominent sections, Upper and Lower Queen Anne. Lower Queen Anne is the most well-known part of this community, as it is home to Seattle Center, which hosts a diverse variety of public events throughout the year. There are a variety of different museums and performance venues as well. There's a dance studio across the city center where people can practice ballet and other expensive dance forms. The Space Needle is also located in Lower Queen Anne, which include a fun touristy gift shop and a restaurant at the top. Lower Queen Anne present as more urban than the upper one. In this area, you'll find more apartment complexes and condos too. In April of 2021, a bill was passed to rename this neighborhood Uptown as a chance for the neighborhood to create its own identity from Queen Anne neighborhood as a center of art, culture, restaurant and shops, and its diverse residents. And Upper Queen Anne is one of the Seattle's oldest residential neighborhoods, which includes Kerry Park. This is a place many high school students visit for events like homecoming and prom to capture images of the beautiful scenery around the area. From this part, you can see across the water and sometimes get a very nice view of Mount Rainier. It's a home to many of the cooler looking older houses, which contributes to highly sought after and expensive housing prices in the area. And there are a variety of restaurants and bars in both parts of Queen Anne, with Lower Queen Anne being slightly more expensive as it attracts the most tourist activities. The highlight spot in Queen Anne. So in this picture we have Kerry Park, where people come here a lot to take picture, and also is a famous touristy spot. And our first impression about Queen Anne is that it is a peaceful neighborhood with the majority of the older adult population. Even though Queen Anne is only 20 minutes away from the downtown Seattle, it has a very quiet, unique, quiet, peaceful vibe. And this could be the reason why many older people choose this location to settle down for retirement. And we saw that a lot of residents were doing exercise, such as running, walking, and Queen Anne is a safe and worth living community. On our second visit, slide. At the first visit, we were impressed and focused on the aesthetic size of the Queen Anne, but in our second visit, we assessed the community through a more holistic lens. During our second visit, we saw a few homeless people around Space Needle area trying to keep themselves warm, but it is the homeless population in here is not as much as in downtown Seattle. And the bus lines are very accessible, which make it easier for people to commute to places around Seattle area. And we also noticed that there are more grocery stores and pharmacy in Upper Queen Anne than the lower one. This is because Upper Queen Anne accumulate more housing.
During our second visit to Queen Anne, we went to the Mecca Cafe, which is a dive bar established in 1929 by Preston and Frances Smith. And the reason that we wanted to include this in our presentation is because of their accomplishments throughout the community and their impacts upon the population there. Because they were established in 1929, they were unfortunately suspended during Prohibition, but reopened in 1933. In 1933, there were some conflicts with some neighboring establishments due to competition and jealousy and all of that fun stuff. So they were shut down again for 9 months, but able to reopen after a court hearing. So their son In 1972, installed a periscope on the Five Point Cafe, which was an establishment also owned by the family. This is still known to this day and a frequent visiting place for tourists in the area. He also argued with the city about the neglect of homeless children in the area, and him and some of his friends gave $3,000 to help build an illegal park in the area that the city was not in favor of. But they did it anyways because they wanted to support those people. Since then, it's been converted to a dog park, which is still used within the community, but it made a lot of impacts at the time. The son took over the business in 1975, and he carried on with both establishments, the Mecca Cafe and the Five Point, until he passed away in 2001. There were some disruptions with ownership of the establishment for a little bit, but the current owner, David Maynard, took over in 2009. He continues to uphold the values of the family and serves food at an affordable price. When we went, we got really big portions, and it was about, I would say, like $13 per person, and they were pretty big, like sizable meals. Like I took half of it home, so that was equivalent of 2 meals for me. Employees at this establishment are also given health insurance, paid vacation, and retirement benefits because part of the deal with the family establishment was that employees were very familiar with the people that they worked with. And at the time that it was owned by their son, he had employees that were there for 20 plus years. And so they wanted to provide compensation for all of their hard work and time at the establishment.
Okay, so my name is Genevieve, and the first thing that I'm going to be talking about is the demographics of Queen Anne. For starters, the total population equals 33,081 people, with the average age of those people living here being 33 years old. The amount of people who identify as male versus female living in the area is about half and half. Additionally, a little less than 15% of these individuals in Queen Anne do not hold U.S. citizenship, with U.S.-born citizens making up about 78% of the population and non-U.S.-born citizens about 7.5%. I also wanted to highlight the race and ethnicity of Queen Anne. In the year 2020, there was about 3 times more non-Hispanic white residents in Queen Anne than any other race or ethnicity. In the graph, we can see that non-Hispanics were outnumbered in every racial category. White people made up the majority, consisting of about 66% of the entire population of Queen Anne. The next most populous racial group was Asians, who made up about 20%, and the smallest group consisted of Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders, who made up a mere 0.1% of the Queen Anne population. Next, when looking at the employment of the population, about 95% of people hold white-collar jobs, and about 3/4 of the population work with private companies, with others working as self-employed government workers or not-for-profit companies being the other big groups. Household dynamics in Queen Anne were also interesting to look at. A majority are non-family households made up of an average of 2 people, typically without children, and renter-occupied rather than owned. And then the last part I wanted to emphasize was the highest level of education achieved by those living in Queen Anne. When comparing the national average, it was actually pretty shocking because less than 1% of the population in Queen Anne had received no high school education, which was almost 12 times less than that of the national average, being 8.9%. In addition to that, about 41% of the Queen Anne population holds bachelor's degrees, in addition to 28% holding a graduate's degree, comparable to the national averages of 23% for a bachelor's degree and 14% for the graduate's degree. Yeah. And then one of the other things we wanted to look at in regards to Queen Anne was the leading cause of death for those living here. On the left here in this table, it shows the leading causes of death in descending order from the highest leading cause of death to the lowest, with the highest being cancer and heart disease, with like a significantly higher number comparable to the suicide and chronic liver disease, which are at about 9.3 and 8.8. And then the last thing I'll be talking about is the available resources we came across when exploring the Queen Anne area. One of the major things we noticed was the accessibility to open spaces and parks in the area. There's a lot of nice places such as Cary Park, which has become a popular destination for people during the school year for dances or just to go see the view because you have like a great view of the Space Needle and the city itself. We also came across a food bank in the area, and there was advertisements for neighborhood and community groups, such as this community counseling ad thing that you see here. And then when doing some research online, I also came across some agencies that were dedicated to offering programs and activities specifically catered and to support senior citizens, which I thought was pretty cool. And here's an example that I found from one of those sites on the right that they created for like as a program like in this. And so I think it's pretty apparent that the area makes an effort to provide resources targeted to its population.
The Queen Anne Helpline is a resource commonly used today by the people living in Queen Anne. It was founded in 1982 by a grocery store owner who noticed the general population was struggling to pay for healthy foods. Today, they provide financial assistance, healthy food, dignified clothing, transportation vouchers, and hygiene products, as well as targeted referrals to anybody in the Seattle area. There are also services they provide specifically for people living in Queen Anne, including rent assistance, move-in assistance, utility payments, and Thanksgiving dinner for seniors.
So we decided to rate the health community in this area as a 4. When doing the community assessment, we came across a few homeless people. However, compared to typical homeless population, the amount were minimal. And beside the homeless people, we encounter majority of population appeared to be well-nourished, healthy, and youthful. We came across many walkers, runners, and many dog walkers. Although the population leans more toward middle age and older adults, it's common to find people exercising and walking to their destination throughout the day. We didn't encounter any situation of crime or suspicious activity as well, which was also supported by our lack of encounter with police or emergency medical personnel during our time there. Life expectancy of resident in Queen Anne is higher than though in other areas in Washington.
Some protective factors we wanted to touch on regarding Queen Anne are its proximity to various hospitals, the primary one in Queen Anne being Swedish. There's also something called Queen Anne Shelter, which is a shelter for 100 men per night. Sign-ups start every day from 8 through 9 a.m., and then these people can enter the shelter at 4 p.m. There's also Compass Plain Emergency Shelter, which provides 24-hour shelter for men. This is available for 60 people per day, including veterans, and their goal is for them to be able to get to a stable housing arrangement. Both of these shelters are available to men specifically, so I wanted to touch on Mary's Place Women's Day Shelter, which was established in 1999. There are 5 of them across King County, and one of them is located in Queen Anne. And they help women and families transition from homelessness to stable living conditions. One of the many reasons that these families come to these shelters is due to domestic violence. And the shelter provided this demographic below of who they help, which are particularly people of color, as you can see from the demographic. The risk factors that we identified in Queen Anne are the overall cost of living. The median house price in this area is $889,000, which has increased by 9% year over year. Food prices in the Seattle area have increased by 11.5%, and energy prices have increased by 22% over the past year. Another risk factor that we identified was transportation. The average commute to work from Queen Anne is 23.4 minutes, and the majority of people in Queen Anne go by car. So if you're taking the bus or walking, that commute is going to be a lot longer. Parking in Queen Anne also costs a lot more than other areas in Seattle due to the events hosted in the area. We saw a lot of signs for event parking, and that would cost about $40 a day. which is significant because if you're commuting to work every single day, that's $40 a day to park. Additionally, public transportation can be unreliable because of varying times, delays in bus routes, and missed stops. So we wanted to include this graph of the general transportation in the area of Queen Anne. As you can see, 8,582 drive to work. This is per year. 4,318 take the bus, and 5,261 walk. Our concern about this community are overall access to healthcare or mental health care. Most mental health physicians are located outside of Queen Anne, which means that people have to find a way to get transportation there. Therapists may or may not accept insurance, and there are fewer resources available to uninsured or underinsured people. Without health insurance, adherence to medication can be difficult due to its costs, as well as visits to the pharmacy, finding transportation for that, which causes people to neglect their mental health. And the overall cost of living was a major concern. The majority of people in Seattle rent property. As you can see from the pie chart, 55% of units are renter occupied, while 45% are owner occupied. And with the recent increase in rent over the past year, it is getting harder to afford housing.
Hi, my name is Emily Trin, or you can call me Owen Trin. I'm in the group for Queen Anne. So today I'm gonna present about social determinant of mental health. I will learn about this conceptualization created by Kupton and Sims. Looking at all these elements in this map, I noticed that the element that mostly affect the patient in Queen Anne is housing insecurity, leading to stress because it's really expensive to live there or own a house there. So the majority of the population rent a room instead of owning a house. So they have to deal with a lot of stress to keep up with the rent payment and the cost of living in Queen Anne. It's required the resident to have and maintain a good paying job. And then the population there are mostly middle-aged up to older adults. So they also have to deal with a lot of family stress and loneliness or social isolation issue. The busy city had high potential to carry toxin and pathogen from unsanitary restaurants, street, and a large amount of car. So heavy traffic and limited parking can also lead to stress in transportation, driving, and increase in the rate of car accident. Even though it's a pretty safe neighborhood to live in, there are still homeless people roaming around at night. So the residents have to live in constant stress of being attacked when walking home from work at night. Can be really dangerous. And then for my place, I live in Kent area, which is about 30 minutes away from Seattle without traffic. So in Kent area, in my experience, I noticed that the leading cause of stress is poverty, poor education, and discrimination. So it's not like too bad. However, when I went to high school here, I noticed that most of the students they play in group. They play in group of their own ethnicity, their own race, color, and we speaking our language instead of English sometimes. But it doesn't. It just was not the same case with other high school. It's just one is more discrimination than the other. And then I noticed that there's more and more homeless people around this area, and it can be getting more and more dangerous walking on the street. That's why nobody walking on the street anymore, only homeless people. And then using the bus can be very dangerous as well, especially at night. Nobody wanna go out at night anymore. And then I'm gonna talk about the learning experience. As a group, it's a good opportunity for us to assess the patient environment and social determinant of health of the patient. Understanding the social determinant of health will provide us with more resources to work with in the future and help us develop the best nursing care plan for the patient. Knowing the patient background and environment will also help us understand the patient's story and perspective to prevent bias and judgment in healthcare in general. We also get to experience heavy teamwork in this experience, divide up the part and learn new leadership skill and have a good time. We enjoy talking to the resident and walking around the neighborhood. That is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening. And this is our reference.